The Police Minister, Bheki Cele, has released the latest crime statistics which have indicated an increase in contact crime as well as sexual offences. For a closer analysis of these numbers, I'm joined by crime and policing expert Dr. Guy Lamb. Dr. Lamb, thank you for your time on the Daytime Update today. When the Police Minister started with the briefing, he started off by saying, don't be alarmed. The increases that you're about to hear are increases in the double digits. He then went on to give us statistics such as a 72.4% increase in rape crimes, a 60.6% increase in contact crimes, a 92.2% increase in aggravated robberies, and so on and so forth. But he also started highlighting the importance of the lockdown periods and how they have affected the numbers that we are seeing now. What are your thoughts and your perspectives on this? Have the lockdown periods really exacerbated these numbers that we're seeing, or could this be a reflection of the real status quo?
Sure. Thank you for your questions. And what happened today is the crime stats that were released today were for the period April 1st to the 30th of June 2021. And typically what the police do is they then compare it to the same periods in previous years. So, of course, they started off the presentation by saying, don't be alarmed, because as you've indicated, the percentages are very high, some as far as, more than 90%, some more than 80%. And the point they wanted to make is that the period of last year, so April to June last year, was a different period. It was an exceptional period. We had lockdown. And what happened during that period is, most categories of crime, particularly violent crime, came down quite substantially. And what happened there was because there was greater police visibility, so more police around, so the higher risks for those who want to perpetrate violent crimes, particularly in public spaces, but also people were locked down to into their homes for many of that period of time. And as a result, less potential victims on the street as well. So the sort of point here is, yes, lockdown did bring about a reduction in crime, but during that particular period, there was a fundamental restriction in personal freedoms. So, especially the freedom of movement. So the sort of point that's being made here is that, that this kind of policing was very temporary, and it's not something that we can take forward into the future, particularly in a democracy. But I think what we can take from that, and the lesson from the lockdown policing, was that increased police visibility can make a difference. So if there are more police around in places where crime is happening, where, particularly violent crime is happening, that visibility can bring about a reduction in crime. But of course, the crime stats that were released today sort of shows that there is a lot of work still that needs to be done in South Africa to bring down crime.
And I'd like to touch on that issue of visibility a little bit later on. But before that, let's wrap this bit up first. What they did do today during the release of the crime statistics is say, forget about 2020. That was at least the same period last year because of the high lockdown level. But instead, to get a clearer picture and a clearer sense of the true variance in the numbers, let's go back a year. Let's go back to 2019. When we do compare the statistics of this year, the period of April to June, with the 2019-2020 year, that very same period, what are the variants? How much are the differences?
Yeah, they did that, but the point that really needs to be made is there's, many categories of violent crime increased. So, if, for example, compare murder between April and June this year compared to, 2019, for example, is murder still went up. It went up by, more than 6%. It was 6.7%. Attempted murder went up by more than 12%. But also, if we look at sort of, for example, the trajectory from 2017, so April to June of 2017, and compare it to now, the increase is even greater. So, for example, there was a 19% increase in murder between those particular periods in time, and attempted murder as well. It was around 15% increase in attempted murder. And the point here is we're seeing this increased trajectory of violent crime within South Africa over the past, many years. So, looking at lockdown and trying to downplay it and saying, well, actually, it's not such an increase, is we take a look at the bigger picture. There is many categories of crime have been increasing over time, and the lockdown was just one particular period of time that had an impact on bringing it down, but the trajectory is still going up. So there's still, a great deal of concern when it comes to crime within South Africa.
You mentioned the importance of visibility a bit earlier on, Dr. Lam, and this is something that Commissioner Cele, as well as Minister Bheki Cele, also highlighted today. But talk to us about the restrictions that police have that don't allow them to be as visible as they perhaps ought to be.
Well, the point is we know from a number of studies, and we know in South Africa, is if the police are visible and are engaged in kind of positive crime prevention activities in high crime areas, we'll see crime rates come down. And this is, we've got a number of studies in the US, in South America, and in Western Europe, which show that if the police focus on high crime areas and are visible in those kind of places, that, it affects crime rates in a very positive way. Less crime happens. I think the problem we face in South Africa is most crime happens in informal settlements. It happens in kind of townships, in a number of townships, and that's displayed within the crime stats in terms of the top 30 areas, also in some inner city neighborhoods. And in these places, the trust between communities and the police isn't good. And people aren't necessarily reporting that many crimes to the police as well. So the crimes are high, but not all the crimes are reported. But it's this trust and relationship between communities and the police that's not good. And certainly the minister alluded to this and said it quite clearly as well, that, the relationships need to be better. And I think, you can have visible police in these areas, but if community members don't trust them and aren't going to go and ask for help, then you're not going to see that police visibility transferring or, translating into reductions in crime.
We saw the importance of police visibility during the riots that were experienced in some parts of Gauteng as well as KwaZulu-Natal, when the police presence was minuscule compared to the number of people who were there looting or breaking into the stores. And now I'm asking you to look forward now to perhaps the next reports. How do you believe the riots of the past month or so are going to affect the crime statistics moving forward, specifically for that period?
Well, certainly in the areas where we saw unrest and we saw rioting happening in those police station precincts, I mean, we're going to see dramatic increases, particularly around, if you look at Phoenix, you're going to see increases obviously in murder, you're going to see increases in attempted murder, you're going to see increases where the looting happened around the kind of robberies and thefts. That's certainly, that data is going to go up. But I think what the sort of rioting and unrest really kind of demonstrated in many areas is the relationships of trust between communities and police, were not strong. Is that, the sense of in communities where there wasn't much looting, there wasn't much unrest, but, had the same sort of profile as the areas that there was unrest, it seemed to have been quite good relationships between communities and police. But in areas where the unrest took place, those relationships weren't there. And I think really kind of looking forward, it's about a priority, I think, for the police is to look at how can you realistically build better relationships in these high crime areas.
There's also another issue that came up, and this is something that Commissioner Cele was speaking about. He says that population has outgrown the policing resources. He further says that geographical spread has outgrown the policing infrastructure. So a decline in police resources, but an increase in population and an increased difficulty in the geographical areas that they need to police. We also heard Minister Cele, they're talking about the budgets that have been cut. There seems to be little synergy, or at least not enough synergy, between Treasury and the ministry itself. How does one strike a balance there?
Well, I mean, the issue is around resources and how you use the resources. I mean, the police have certainly over the years received an increased share of the budget, as compared to many other departments. Obviously, the police, it's been presented already, like most government departments have to cut because of COVID and the downturn in the economy and tax collection. So that's going to have an implication. I mean, the challenge that police have faced is that you've seen population growth, particularly in urban and peri-urban areas, in many informal settlements where the police don't have a dedicated police station, or they have a police station that is servicing a large number of people. Now, of course, the big issue with police resources is about, we've always seen the skewed nature of resources as wealthier middle-class areas tend to get more police relative to the size of populations compared to poorer areas. And there's, need to really look at that and sort of say, well, how can we invest more of the policing resources that we have to the areas where they need it the most. And so that kind of issue is under discussion at the moment, but the point here is we really, from the police point of view, you have to do more with what you've got and think about it in more kind of strategic ways about using those resources in high crime areas.
Dr. Guy Lamb, thank you very much for your insight there. That's crime and policing expert Dr. Guy Lamb on the crime statistics that were just released. Do stay with us.